in a world obsessed with image, sex, and status. There was once a man who walked barefoot through the streets of ancient Athens with nothing but a cloak, a stick, and a lamp, searching not for pleasure, but for truth. His name was Diogenes, and he called out the foolishness of mankind in the most outrageous ways imaginable. He didn't just question society, he insulted it, mocked it, and spat in its face. But one of his most brutal critiques? It was aimed squarely at men who spent their lives chasing women. To Diogenes, this wasn't romance. It was enslavement, an illusion, a trap for weak minds who mistook lust for meaning. So what did this wild, wandering philosopher really believe? What was his message to the men who worship women, chase validation, and mistake desire for destiny? In this video, we're uncovering Diogenes' raw, unfiltered truths about lust, masculinity, and why chasing women might be the most unphilosophical thing a man can do. An ancient criticism that cuts just as deep now as it did then. To understand why Diogenes said what he said, and why it still hits hard today, you need to understand who he was. Because Diogenes wasn't just a philosopher. He was a one-man rebellion against everything society told people to value. Born in the 4th century BCE in Sinope, a city on the coast of modern-day Turkey, Diogenes didn't come from poverty. His father was a banker. But Diogenes' life changed when he and his father were accused of defacing currency, literally corrupting the money system. Most men would have gone into hiding. Diogenes. He took it as a sign that society itself was corrupt, and that maybe the real currency that needed defacing wasn't money, but values. He moved to Athens and began living in complete rejection of comfort, status, and convention. No house, no possessions, no shame. He slept in a large ceramic jar, a kind of ancient Greek street barrel. He begged for food. He owned only a cloak, a staff, and a small bowl, which he later threw away when he saw a child drinking with his hands. Why carry a bowl, he reasoned, when your body is already equipped? But here's what made Diogenes different. He wasn't withdrawing from the world like a monk. He was in the center of it, taunting it, mocking it, exposing it. He called himself a cosmopolitan, a citizen of the world, not of any nation or tribe. He rejected social hierarchies and saw customs as invented games that distracted people from reality. He thought most people were sleepwalking, trapped in routine, blinded by ego, and obsessed with things that didn't matter. And he made his point not with essays but with acts. When Plato called man a featherless biped, Diogenes showed up with a plucked chicken and declared, "Here is Plato's man." When he saw people wasting time trying to impress others, he laughed at them. When someone asked how he could live without a home or family, he said, "I am not homeless. I just refuse to be owned." The people in power hated him. The masses didn't know what to do with him. But some, especially the young and curious, saw something radical in his lifestyle. Freedom. Not comfort, not pleasure, but the kind of freedom that comes from needing nothing and fearing no one. And that's the key to understanding his philosophy on desire. Diogenes didn't see lust as romantic or noble. He saw it as another trick, another way men became slaves to impulse, blinded by fantasy, distracted from truth. For Diogenes, if you had to chase something to feel whole, you were already broken. To Diogenes, freedom wasn't a political concept, it was personal. And the greatest threat to that freedom? Desire, not hunger, not survival instinct, not the kind of desire that keeps you alive. He meant the craving, the constant itch for pleasure, attention, approval. And at the center of it, he saw one powerful force that enslaved men more than kings or empires ever could: lust. In Diogenes' world, most men weren't led by reason or virtue. They were led by impulse, by fantasy, by the idea that they needed a woman to complete them, or worse, validate them. And Diogenes didn't just disagree with that idea. He detested it. He saw it as a kind of self-imposed imprisonment, a man becoming a beggar for affection, a servant to his own cravings, pretending it was love. He once famously said, "It is not I who am mad, but the world." And when it came to sex and romance, he thought the world had completely lost its mind. Imagine watching men sacrifice their dignity, energy, time, and money just to impress someone who might not even respect them. Diogenes watched that every day, and in his eyes, it was no different from watching a drunk chase after a bottle. Why would a man devote himself to something that can't be controlled, can't be owned, and ultimately doesn't lead to wisdom? Because, Diogenes believed, men have been trained to think desire makes them powerful, when in reality, it often exposes their weakness. He didn't see men and women as enemies. He saw the game of chasing as the trap, and he refused to play it. He used to mock men who bragged about their romantic conquests. To him, they weren't triumphant. They were possessed. A real man, in his eyes, wasn't someone who could win over a woman, but someone who could win back control of himself. There's even a story where Diogenes, when asked why he pleasured himself in public, replied, "Would that it were as easy to banish hunger by rubbing my belly." Crude, yes. But his point was dead serious. Why do we treat sexual desire as sacred, while treating every other appetite as just a biological fact? He wasn't promoting shamelessness. He was exposing hypocrisy. To Diogenes, the noble man didn't conquer others. He conquered need. Because the more you need something outside of yourself, especially for identity, for validation, for meaning, the less free you are. He wanted men to wake up, to stop chasing, to stop being trained dogs waiting for a pat on the head or a glance of approval. He believed the path to self-mastery started when a man could look desire in the face and say, "You don't own me." Now let's take everything Diogenes said and hold it up to our world. You might think, sure, that's ancient Greece. That's philosophy. What does that have to do with me? Everything. Because if Diogenes were alive today, he wouldn't see much of a difference. In fact, he'd probably say things have gotten worse. Back then, men were chasing status through marriage, wealth, or reputation. Now, it's through likes, followers, and attention, all dressed up as self-worth. The platforms have changed. The addiction hasn't. Men are still chasing women to feel powerful, still bending over backwards for attention, still measuring their value by who wants them, who sleeps with them, who praises them. In today's world, it's as much about external validation, whether it's through social media or high-value status symbols, as it ever was in ancient Athens. Diogenes would have looked at the guy obsessing over DMs, refreshing his dating app, building his identity around how many matches he gets, and said, "You call that freedom? You're owned, not by a person, but by your own desperation." The modern man is bombarded with signals: get the girl, or you're not a real man. Be desired, or you're invisible. Show off success, or no one will respect you. And Diogenes would have laughed, not because it's funny, but because it's so painfully obvious. The same trap, just wrapped in Wi-Fi and filters. Even men who claim to be seeking true love are often seeking validation, confirmation that they're worthy of being loved. To Diogenes, love wasn't something to chase, but to become. You can't seek what you already are. And let's be honest, how many men today actually know who they are without the attention? Remove the validation, turn off the likes, take away the compliments and conquests, and what's left? Most wouldn't know, because most have never asked. They've been too busy chasing someone else's idea of value. That's what made Diogenes dangerous, not his lifestyle, not his shamelessness, but the fact that he didn't need approval. He didn't need status. He didn't need to perform. And that kind of man? He's unpredictable. He's untouchable. He's free. And that freedom is terrifying to a world built on the idea that happiness comes from external things, whether that's fame, fortune, or a woman's gaze. And more importantly, he's free. That's what scared people about him then, and it's what challenges people now. Because if you take an honest look in the mirror, you might see it. You don't need to be Diogenes to be enslaved. You just need to be driven by things you don't control. Diogenes didn't just take issue with individual behavior. He set his sights on society itself. And to him, society was a stage where everyone played roles that were as hollow as the applause they received. One of the most glaring hypocrisies he saw? The double standards between men and women. Men were encouraged to chase, conquer, and consume. Women? They were expected to remain pure, obedient, and in many ways, invisible. Diogenes couldn't stand it. At the time, Athenian society had very strict rules about gender roles. Men could engage in affairs, multiple relationships, and pursue as much pleasure as they wanted, without it being a moral question. Women, on the other hand, had to fit into a very narrow set of expectations: quiet, chaste, and above all, untouched. If a woman had a sexual desire, society frowned upon her. If a man indulged in lust, society cheered him on. But Diogenes wasn't fooled by these double standards. He knew that society wasn't setting these rules for any kind of moral purity. It was about control, manipulating the behavior of both sexes to benefit the status quo. He mocked the notion that men's desires were natural, while women's desires were shameful. He saw right through it. There's one famous story where Diogenes confronted Plato, who had stated that man was a featherless biped. Diogenes plucked a chicken and brought it to Plato's academy, declaring, "Here is Plato's man." It wasn't just a prank. It was a challenge to the intellectual arrogance of philosophers who overcomplicated the simplest truths. And that was Diogenes' whole philosophy: cut through the nonsense, see the truth, and call it out, loudly. This mockery wasn't just aimed at philosophers. Diogenes went after politicians, religious figures, and anyone who perpetuated the idea that some people were above others. In his eyes, there were no natural hierarchies, just artificial systems of control that trapped people in roles they didn't choose. Take marriage, for example. In his day, marriage was often a business deal. It wasn't about love or equality. Men would marry women to increase their social status, secure alliances, or maintain family lines. Women, in return, were expected to uphold their virtue and stay loyal, while men could cheat or have multiple lovers without consequence. Diogenes didn't shy away from exposing this hypocrisy. He didn't believe in a hierarchy of desires, nor did he see any reason to value one person's desires over another's. To him, men and women were both victims of a system of control, and this system was held together by expectations of sexual purity, social propriety, and conventional morality. For him, true freedom didn't involve catering to one group's desires while suppressing the others. It meant rejecting the idea that anyone should have the power to dictate how another person should live. His life was his protest. And when it came to gender and desire, Diogenes wasn't interested in preserving the traditional balance of power. He wanted to strip it down, to make it clear that the only natural desire was the desire for freedom. To Diogenes, everyone was playing a role, but nobody had the courage to break out of character. He saw society as a great performance, one where men pretended to be powerful, women pretended to be pure, and everyone pretended to be content with the role they were assigned. Diogenes didn't play that game. He wasn't concerned with the opinions of society. He wasn't bound by the constraints of conventional morality. He mocked what others worshipped, and in doing so, He challenged all of us to ask, what would happen if we all stopped pretending? So, after everything we've explored about Diogenes and his harsh yet profound critique of society, what does it all mean for us today? We're not ancient Greeks. We're not living in barrels or challenging philosophers in the streets. But the human experience, the desires, the ego, the chasing of status, those haven't changed as much as we'd like to think. And that's where Diogenes' lessons still strike a nerve. Desire is still one of our greatest prisons. Men today still chase approval, still measure their worth based on who desires them, who notices them. They still believe that finding the right woman or being desired by the right crowd will finally make them feel complete. Diogenes would say that's a trap. And here's the real kicker. The more you chase, the more you become enslaved, because the need for external validation never ends. One compliment leads to another craving. One conquest leads to another disappointment. The man who chases desires, whether for sex, status, or approval, is never free. He's always seeking something outside of himself to fill the void. And when you're constantly seeking, you never find peace. So what can we learn from Diogenes? First, that true freedom comes from self-sufficiency. Diogenes didn't need the approval of others. He didn't need wealth, possessions, or even love in the conventional sense. He had a sense of self that was unshakable. He wasn't afraid of being alone because he didn't need to fill the silence with external distractions. He was free because he didn't place his happiness in the hands of others. But second, and perhaps more importantly, Diogenes was calling us to break free from the performance. How many of us are living lives built around roles and expectations set by others? How many of us are playing a part in the show, just trying to get the audience's applause? Whether it's chasing status through wealth, fame, or relationships, we're all performing in some way. And the truth is, most of us don't even know it. Freedom isn't about breaking the rules. It's about breaking the illusion. Take a moment and ask yourself, what are you really chasing? Are you chasing validation from others? Are you constantly looking for the next high, the next hit of attention or desire? If so, ask yourself, when does it end? When do you stop needing the next fix? True strength isn't about conquering others. It's about conquering yourself. It's about understanding that happiness and worth don't come from the external world. They come from within. It comes from mastering the desire to please others, to seek constant validation, to chase after things that ultimately leave you empty. Diogenes wasn't just living outside the box. He was showing the world that the box was a trap, and he dared to live beyond it. So what does it mean to be a modern-day Diogenes? It means having the courage to live without needing the approval of the world. It means being honest about your desires and asking whether those desires are truly yours or whether they've been programmed by society. It means refusing to live a life defined by what others think, and instead, defining your life based on your own values. It means stepping back from the chase and asking yourself, what is it that I truly need to feel complete? Because until you know that, you'll keep running in circles, trying to fill a void that no external thing can ever satisfy. Diogenes once said, "I am looking for an honest man." But maybe what he was really searching for wasn't just honesty in others, it was honesty within oneself. In a world where we're constantly told to chase, to prove, to seek approval, Diogenes shows us a radical alternative: to stop searching outside and start looking within. The true question isn't how much can I acquire, or how many people can I impress. It's, who am I when I don't need anything from anyone? Philosophy is not about knowing more. It's about knowing yourself. And the more you understand yourself, the less you'll be enslaved by the desires that once ruled you. So ask yourself, are you chasing something because you believe it will make you whole? Or have you already found the freedom to be complete, just as you are? To live like Diogenes, is not to abandon society, but to abandon the illusions that hold us captive. It's about embracing the freedom of being unshackled by the expectations of the world. To be truly free is to no longer be owned by desire, by validation, or by the fleeting judgments of others. So, let go of the chase. And in that stillness, you may find the clarity that Diogenes had all along. Because in the end, freedom is not something you can pursue, it's something you already possess. You just need to stop looking elsewhere to realize it.